So I didn't bring anything from the garden to open the show today.
Well, I wonder why.
I couldn't really get out there this morning and get a whole lot. I do got something later that pertains to one of the questions we're going to ask, but I really couldn't get anything. It is wet.
You'd need to paddle in a canoe, would you?
It is wet. It is wet. Now, not only is it wet down here, so I've been in San Diego earlier this week and came back yesterday, was driving. I took the back way from Atlanta through Columbus, come back to here to avoid some kind of afternoon traffic. And it's wet down here, but middle Georgia up around there, you won't believe. These fields don't look like you're going to be able to get in them for a while. These ponds where there wasn't a pond before, and they got a mess. I've been seeing a lot of pictures on Facebook, roads being washed out, everything.
Yeah, if you ain't got your taters in the ground, you've messed up, and if you got them in the ground, you still may have messed up.
Well, when I got home yesterday afternoon, I had a sliver of daylight left, and I went out there to see if any of mine had come up yet, and they hadn't. But I said, I'm going to just see if I got any of these things rotten. And I scratched a little bit and found one, and it was still nice and hard. I had roots on it to shoot. So, if you let them cure right, I think you're going to be okay.
Oh, yeah, you'll be fine on these. I've had them in all the years I've been planting potatoes. I had them rot 1 year. You're going to be fine unless you plant on the bottom land and you got them more clay soils that won't drain there. You got troubles there. But if you got high sandy soils, you're going to be all right. Now,
you can have some issues when they get closer, getting ready to harvest time. If you get too wet, they start rotting on you once some plants start dying back. But we can't really do nothing about it. It's wet. I was going to plant squash as soon as I got back, but I think I'm going to have to hold off a few days to dry out. Anyway, let's say hi to everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Row by Row Garden Show. I'm Travis.
I'm Greg.
And we're excited to have you with us tonight. We've got a really good show planned. We're going to do a rapid-fire Q&A segment tonight.
Boom, boom.
And this is your first time joining us. Welcome. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button below and that bell button so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. And if you're a frequent viewer of the show, it's always good to have you back. So we talked about it being wet. A lot of folks having that problem. Glad I got my taters in when I did. Glad I squeezed them in. You want to talk about, a lot of people have been asking about fertilizing their peppers and the eggplants.
The transplants, because this is the time of year when most of us have got transplants growing in the garden. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about growing transplants and fertilizing. Now, just a day or so ago, I was back there working pretty hard, and I come back in and flew through the office there and got on the row by row, and somebody had posted a question, and I wrote down it real quick and answered it. And I didn't read the question good, and I answered it wrong.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and do a rebuttal on that. And there was a couple people in there that corrected me. And I want to say this right here about our group, our Row by Row group. It is a wonderful group to have, and it's not about us.
Right.
It's about the community. And this is what I'm fixing to tell you right here. We have a wonderful group of people on there and knowledgeable. Man, you talking about some good farmers on there and some good growers on there and some people that know what they're doing. These people on there that's a lot more knowledgeable than what we are.
That's right.
So we've got a bunch of good people on there. Now, we had a guy maybe a year ago that was posting some stuff on there that was a little out of whack. And if you do that, we're going to call you out on it. But 99% of the time, we always have people that want to give good advice, and it's different. I mean, growing regions are different. Things are done different areas, and that's fine. That's great. And we got people that want to give advice, want to help other people out, and that's wonderful. And a couple other guys on there come back and told me I was wrong. So I went back and reread it, and I said, yeah, I was wrong. So then we fixed all that. I gave them the recipe of what I use out in the field after they transplanted.
Right.
And that's not what the guy asked, and I didn't read the whole question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on from that. So when we use 20-20-20,
you got some right there if you want to pull it up, show it.
When we use this right here, which is what the majority of us use to do our transplants, this stuff here is wonderful stuff, but it can be confusing about how much to use, because if you get to reading directions, they always want to talk about ppm, and that's parts per million. And you have to get your calculator out, and it takes you a long time if you got the patience to figure it all out. So what we want to give you today is some quick reference guides of how to use this stuff on your transplants. Now, to start with, if you're using this on transplants and you don't have the host cycle that we use, mixer we use, and you want to just put it on there, the guy in the Facebook questions won't use a 1 gallon sprayer, which is possible. I think a water can is a better avenue to put it out, because really what you want to do is you want to put it out as a soil drench. You're not going to get a lot of nutrients in that plant when it's just got a couple of leaves on there. Soil drench is the best way to get it on there. And I went back and did the math, and along with what people said on that particular posting, they were right. So you may want to write this down. If you're using a watering can or a 1 gallon sprayer as a soil drench on seedlings that just have putting on their true leaves or just got the 2 leaves and you feel like you need to put some fertilizer on there, the rate is a 1/2 teaspoon to 1 tablespoon per gallon. Now the middle rate there would be 1 teaspoon per gallon, which is what the majority of people use.
It's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, I believe.
I believe you're right. They 6 an ounce. How about that?
How about that?
Anyhow, 1 teaspoon per gallon. Water can, drench it in. You get some on leaves, that's fine too, but you're going to get way more uptake by putting it, drenching into that root system there. So there we have it, 1 teaspoon per gallon. Now, if you're using the hose siphon that we use and a lot of people use, and if you're not using it, what's it, 20 bucks?
Yeah.
Man, this thing's wonderful. If you're using the hose siphon, this is the recipe you want to use. I take 8 ounces of 20-20-20 and I mix it in a bucket with 2.5 to 3 gallons of water. I tell you that because you ain't got to get real precise with this. This you can get pretty. Don't be measuring out your gallons. You just fill it 5 gallon bucket up where you think it's 2.5, 3 gallons. 8 ounces and 2.5 to 3 gallons of water. Then put your hose siphon, mix it in that, and pull out of that. And that will pull out at a ratio of 16:1. For every 16 gallons that comes out of water, it's going to be pulling 1 gallon out of that bucket. Now the rate that's going to give you, if my math is halfway right, is going to be the same as 1 teaspoon per gallon. So there you have it. That's easy, quick reference numbers there. 8 ounces of this in 2.5, 3 gallons in a 5 gallon bucket. Mix it up well. Put your whole sulfur mix in there and pull it out 16:1. Do that every 5 to 10 days, and that'll work wonders for you.
Okay. If we're using a brass siphon mixer, we're going to do 1 cup per 2-3 gallons. If we're using a water can, we're going to do 1 teaspoon per gallon.
Oh, you said 1 cup. Yeah, you did once. That's 8 ounces. That's right.
I would say with the, it's not as a big issue as with the siphon mixer as if you're using a watering can. If you're using a watering can and you are applying it from the top over the leaves, I would, because I have seen this happen before in some cases, if you leave that residue on there, it can burn them young leaves. So I would say after you fertilize it, take your watering can with just some straight water, and you don't have to drench them, but just kind of wash off them leaves a little bit.
Yeah, that didn't never hurt.
So speaking of peppers, fertilizing stuff, we had a lot of people get antsy with the peppers. They plant the peppers, and I'll let you set that back down there. The peppers take a long time to germinate, a long time, and they plant the peppers and nothing happens in about a week and a half, and they start to get nervous and antsy. Was my seeds any good and anything like that? I will tell you, I started our peppers in the 338 trays, and they close to need to be stepped up, and if it wasn't raining, I would have brought some of these in here. Ours were on 100-degree heat map, and they still took 2.5, 3 weeks for some varieties to germinate. I've heard of people, I've been talking to a lot of people that say, I've got them on a heat mat, and I'll say, how hot's your heat mat? Well, I got it set to 70 degrees or so. Now crank that puppy up. If you can get it to 100 degrees like you can ours, we sell with a thermostat, crank it all the way up.
So Tony, a buddy of mine up in South Carolina, he actually grows a lot of pepper plants and sells them commercially. And we was talking about them hot peppers. He said some of them hot peppers, he's got a germination chamber, a nice germination chamber, does everything by the book. He said it can take him up to 6 weeks to get some of those hot pepper germinated. And I got some ghost peppers out there that's tested my patience. Been out there 4 weeks in the humidity dome, they have not come up.
Yeah, I did say one person on the Road by Road show said they had their ghost peppers, they came up.
Did they?
But yeah, peppers will certainly test your patience. Just stick with them, and you got to give them, I'd say, at least 3 weeks before you just call it a scratch and start some more.
Yeah, them hot ones you give them more than that.
Few other things. So in the last few weeks, we've been talking about a lot of I might offend somebody.
Don't offend nobody, Trav.
somewhat we would call gimmicks. Planting by the moon, putting the fish in the hole, putting the egg in the hole, soaking the seeds in buttermilk. Speaking of that, soaking the okra seeds in buttermilk. Apparently, and I've never seen this problem, apparently some folks have problems with getting the okra seeds to germinate. But okra is one of the easiest things, especially that jambalaya we got. It'd come up in 3 days.
If it's not cold dirt, cold soil.
Right.
That's the biggest thing you got to watch with okra seed is put it in cold soil.
But to me, okra is one of the easier germinating crops out there. Anyway, so back to all these kind of gimmicks here. And the reason we don't really like the gimmicks, or we don't really like to promote the gimmicks, our whole goal with everything we do is to help people grow their own food. We want to keep it as simple as possible, and especially for the young gardeners, or maybe you're not young, but you just retired and you're new to gardening. For the beginner gardeners out there, I think it's very important to keep things simple and to not confuse everybody with all these little tips and tricks that don't necessarily always work, or that are not necessary.
Right.
So if I'm telling somebody how to plant tomatoes, I'm going to say, plant them deep, make sure you get some calcium in there because they're going to need that, and go from there. This putting eggs and fish and all this stuff, it just
complicates the matter.
Complicates things way more than it needs to.
That's right. Amen.
So we're not out here just to shoot everybody's ideas down. If you got something you just like to do, that's fine. But our goal here is to simplify things for people that are trying to grow their own food.
And for them to be successful. That's why we carry varieties that will be successful. And we try to have techniques that are real simple so you can be successful. All right, I got one thing I want to talk about real quick before we go into this is our pressure regulator combo that goes in our drip irrigation kits, and we sell these also individually. If you have purchased one of these in the last month, then you may have an issue or two, and I want to go over that. This is a customer service thing here.
Okay, before you get into that, can I explain this right here real quick?
Yeah.
So we've had some people asking, and I haven't got them switched over we had a bunch already printed, our instructions. We used to use a brass piece right here. And I can tell you, because I've used both. I had the first ever drip system I put in my garden, I had a plastic one like this little hose swivel here. And that thing has never leaked, and it's never cracked, and it's done great. Now those brass ones, we had some issues with them, and they would leak sometimes, and they just didn't perform like we wanted to. I know that goes against conventional wisdom. Most people would think a brass fitting is going to be way better than a plastic fitting, but in this case, it isn't. These plastic ones work way, way better than those brass ones do.
Yeah, we didn't switch because of money. We switched because the quality of these work better.
Okay, anyway, go ahead.
All right, so we had a couple of issues with this ongoing, and I know this happened, I'm pretty sure this happened within the last month. I don't know how many of these went out there wrong, but we had a few of these go out wrong, and I want to explain to you what the problem is, and you can look at yours if you purchase one to make sure everything's kosher, or as we say, good. Mm-hmm. First of all, we had some of these parts come in that were mislabeled. And they were labeled wrong, and a few of those went out before we realized that has got water hose threads underneath there. Water hose threads and pipe threads are different. This piece that goes into the filter here is pipe threads. So this fitting right here is supposed to have water hose threads, and then the pipe thread goes in here. That way you can hook it up to a water hose. We had a few go out that was that were pipe threads on pipe threads, and they will not hook up to a water hose. You can look in there, and if you know much about threads, you can actually look in there and tell which is which. If you've got one that will not hook up to a water hose, then you got the wrong one on there. Contact us and we will send you the right one. But that ain't all. The pressure regulator right here has got an arrow on there showing the flow of water, and this thing always flows this way. Well, we got a new girl in the back, bless her heart, she is doing wonderful. But evidently I did not explain to her correctly how to put these together, and she put some of them together wrong, and some of them went out before we caught it, and I had a customer email us, and I said, man, appreciate you letting me know, and I go back there and we get them all switched out. If that arrow is turned around the other way, it will not work properly.
Arrow needs to be in the direction of your flow.
Direction of your flow. I had a guy called yesterday, said he couldn't get water to his drip tank. I said, let's go look at some of that. He went back out there and it was turned around wrong. I said, turn around, work perfect for him. So those are 2 customer service issues we've had as of late that we would like to share with you. Check these if you've got one as of late and make sure that's right. If you need any help with it, if you need any help with it, or you need some advice with it, call us and we'll help you out. We'll take whatever actions it takes to get it fixed for you.
All right. Before we get into our rapid fire Q&A, I always like to share a few seed varieties with you. And this week we were talking a lot about peppers. I'm gonna try to hold these still. This one here has been flying off the shelves, and for good reason. This is a really good variety of bell pepper called Touchdown. Supposed to make some real big ones. So we've been selling a lot of these. We just had to order a heap more, and really popular variety. If you're looking for a big, solid, good hybrid bell pepper, that Touchdown's the way to go. This one right here was just a kind of a big Italian roasting pepper. I love these kind of peppers right here.
Now, would you classify this as sweet?
Yeah, this is sweet.
Okay.
And so this is called Mamma Mia pepper. We have a yellow and a red. The red is called Rosso. I think that's Italian for red. We got 2 kinds of jalapenos. We've got kind of a standard jalapeno, which makes one, it's kind of smaller, a couple inches long. Then we got this new one called Cinder, which makes a big jumbo mumbo jalapeno if you like to stuff them and throw them on the grill, wrap them in a little bacon like we do. And these puppies right here, what does that say that germination rate is?
97%.
97%, which you won't hardly find that on peppers. There's some good germinating seeds there. And then we've got this Lola banana pepper. We saw a trial of this, biggest banana peppers I have ever seen.
Now that's the one I like to stuff and grill.
We've never grown this particular banana pepper variety, but we did see it in a trial and they were massive, and really excited about that. And this last one here, which a lot of people might not know about, but this is an excellent pepper, and the plants on this don't get super big. So if you do got a smaller garden or maybe do a little container garden, this one's perfect. It's called Santa Fe Grand, and it's a little warmer than a poblano, but not as hot as a jalapeno. So it's tolerable. It's not going to light you up, but it's got a little heat to it.
I can eat poblanos.
And what we did with this last time I grew them, this several years ago, I found a recipe online to make some hot honey mustard kind of jelly stuff with them, and it was really good. You took some whole grain mustard and ground some of these up, and I made like a pepper jelly with it, and these things are really good. So check out those pepper varieties on the site if you're still needing to get some peppers started.
So we're going to do some questions.
Okay, we're going to bust through some of these here. And so we've got 18 questions we're going to try to get through here. And what we're going to do at the end is we got a little hat, and we're going to draw 2 numbers which correspond to the name on the question. And we're going to give away 2 of our new hats there to 2 of these people who played the question game. All right. Let's get started.
All right, number 1 comes from Ernie Tiller, and he says, this will be my first year growing on drip. Going to use the FAD system, F-A-D, FAD. Should I go 2 or 3 foot spacing on my corn? And how about a good corn video soon? Thanks.
Well, I promise you, when I do plant my corn, I'll do a video on it. As far as the row spacing, I've tried 2 foot on corn. What happens is you got so much foliage there, your pollen from your tassel can't get down to your ears, get poor pollination and sorry looking ears of corn. I wouldn't go any narrower than 30 inches on corn, 30 to 36. That's the standard. I can tell you because I've made that mistake. Don't do 2 foot on corn. Number 2, Laurie Hines says, is there any difference in fertilization methods or times with raised beds rather than in-ground gardening? Wondering if rain tends to wash away nutrients sooner in raised beds.
It's a great question, and I've thought about this before because we've got a few raised beds. It's according somewhat, it's not a cut and dry answer, it's according somewhat to what kind of medium you have in those raised beds. But they do drain a lot better, and you're going to get a lot more water leaching through those, normally thinking than you would something that's in the ground. So you kind of have to treat them a little bit different. Now we know phosphorus doesn't leach, but your potassium and your nitrogen will. So doing things in a raised bed, I would do a little bit different. this complete organic fertilizer we got is some wonderful stuff, but it's not necessarily, it's not something you really want to do on a large scale because it can get kind of pricey, but on a small scale like raised beds, it is a perfect product to incorporate in there before you plant. And this is an organic fertilizer that gives you that nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus that you need, and it'll work, those microbes are there, and it would work wonders. So I would pay attention a little bit to my nitrogen and potassium, and I would use those organic fertilizers, incorporate them into my soil, then you want to side dress 2 or 3 weeks after. But I do think, to answer your question, I think it's possible they can leach more.
Yeah, if you're using in your raised beds just straight store-bought stuff, that stuff's pretty fine and could leach pretty easily. If you had
there's so many variations out there of what kind it is and what a cation exchange value of each one of them is. But in general, I'd say that's a good rule of thumb to go by.
All right.
All right, David Montgomery wants to know, here's a question for you. Is there a good sweet corn variety that you would suggest that will grow well without irrigation, somewhat drought tolerant?
Well, all corn likes water, but if there was one that I would recommend, it'd be this one right here. So this is the old Stoll's Evergreen sweet corn, and we sell this in packets, 1 pound, 10 pounds. You can get all you want of it. I just brought this big bag just to kind of show you what it looks like. So this is the old heirloom variety. Our friends Danny and Juan at Deep South been growing this stuff for years. They love Stoll's Evergreen. It's a good sweet corn variety. It has some bread, I won't say bread in it, but some native drought tolerance to it. Really good variety if you ain't got a lot of irrigation going on.
What I have noticed with corn is your heirloom varieties, whether it be field corn or sweet corn, are way more drought tolerant than your hybrids.
Yeah, and the more you get into the hybrids, the triple sweets or whatever, that's where that drip irrigation can come into play more.
Yep.
All right. Number 4 is from Preston McCracken. He says, I have a question about growing in a high tunnel. I recently completed an Atlas high tunnel, they're right down the road from us, that I was able to purchase through the NRCS program for veterans. My question is, it seems like the high tunnel basically shifts the growing season from one zone south from your actual location. He's in zone 7B, 8A. So should he change his planting schedule, basically ours, with the high tunnel? Basically skip up a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think so. I think you could do that. Now I'm going to tell you a couple, and I've got a little bit of experience with high tunnels, not as much as some of the other people in our group. This is the 2 things I've noticed about a high tunnel. Even though your temperature may not vary a lot from the inside of the high tunnel to the outside, what it will do is keep the frost off from your leaves. So it does do that and keeps from getting some damage that I notice I have out in the garden. So the temperature, the frost issue on the leaves and the temperature is a little bit of a different thing. So it keeps them from damage as much as you do on the outside, even though you may not have 4 or 5 degrees difference in the temperature. Another thing is you can grow a lot cleaner in these high tunnels. Example of that is growing lettuce. We've grown a lot of lettuce in high tunnels. Of course, you have to irrigate everything in the high tunnel because you can't expect to get any overhead irrigation. We use drip. When you use that drip irrigation on lettuces, man, they are really clean. A lot cleaner than outside where you get those splashes on there. So 2 of the crops, well, let me go with 3. 3 of the crops that I'd recommend doing in a high tunnel that I think you will have great experience with is plant your summer squash about 2 weeks earlier than everybody else, and you can get a head start on them. You can have squash before anybody else. Lettuces seem to do real good there because they don't have that water issue, and you can control the environment, and you can grow some wonderful lettuce in them. And also tomatoes. There's an indeterminate tomato variety or 2 that we have that would grow wonderful in high tunnels. Now they take a lot of work to them. You have to trellis them and things like that, but you could use some good indeterminate tomatoes in there. Squash or lettuce would be the 3 things that I would start out working with.
Yeah, it takes a little getting used to there. And you being in zone 7, with ours, there comes a point in the late spring, early summer where you can't grow pigweed in there. It's so hot. You'll probably have they'll probably have a little longer window when they can actually grow in there.
All right. Laura Lawson wants to know, what did the pioneers do for fertilizer before they could run down to the hardware store and buy it.
I thought this was a really interesting question because I never really thought about it.
Oh, I have.
What did the pioneers do? The obvious.
I could talk about this one for
the
days.
obvious answer, and they also couldn't run to the store and buy a 50-pound bag of cover crop seed either. So the obvious answer to me was that they probably had some grazing program with their livestock with manure, and they had some kind of fallow ground program where they would let the ground rest, let the animals graze it, let the manure kind of boost up the nutrient levels. That would probably be my best guess.
Yeah, manures was a huge role in early farming. That's all they had.
Cows,
goats, whatever.
Yeah. Number 6 is from Josh Beck, and he says, what advice would you give on growing artichokes or asparagus, starting a large bed in front of the house?
Well, Josh, I know absolutely zero about growing artichokes. Did I say zero? Zero. I don't even really know what they even look like. Nary. But I can give you a little advice on asparagus. Asparagus is a great product to grow on a homestead. If you like asparagus, you should be growing it. If you don't like asparagus, don't waste your time. But if you like asparagus as we do, it is something that can give you years of food. For about 6 weeks out of the year, we harvest asparagus. And you plant it. I think the lifespan, most people would say, is 10 to 15 years before you have to redo it. There's variations there about how well you keep it up. Plant it, 2 to 3 years, you can start harvesting it, and it gives a wealth of product back to you. Return on investment on asparagus is huge. It's a little bit complicated when you're putting it in, and I think I got a video out there we'll put in the description below showing how do you dig it out. You got to plant it deep, you got to get some good root stock, how you fertilize it, drip irrigation on it to get it started and all that. But check out that video, but definitely grow asparagus if it's one of those things you and your family enjoy eating.
Yeah, and if you want a good source for asparagus crowns, there's a website called Norse Farms, Nourse.
Yep.
That's where we got ours from, and they got some nice looking crowns you can order there.
All right, David Casey wants to know, can you show us how your shallots are coming along?
So this is one thing I did brave the swamp this morning to bring it out. And now, I want to talk about this for a minute, so bear with me. I ain't really got this shallot thing completely figured out yet. I know they are fun to grow, and it's easy because you plant them right there beside your onions and your elephant garlic and stuff. Now I got some of these that, as you see here, are starting to multiply like this right here. And then I got other ones that are just making a big old bulb. Like
and the same variety, right?
Same row, same variety. I don't understand it. So some of them, because people would ask us, will these shallots multiply? And I always said, yeah, because mine did last year. So that one's got 4 pieces on it. So that one's, some of them are multiplying like that, and some of them making a big old bulb, kind of like you see at the store with the shallots. I do not know what causes them to stay like this or what causes them to start to multiply. I fed them just like I have my onions and everything else. I know that right there eat just as good as that right there eat. They do have kind of more of a, if you can tell in this light, more of a yellowish kind of a darker skin on them or flesh than a regular onion does. But that's my shallots there.
Maybe a question for some of our viewers to help us out.
Yeah,
with.
Maybe some of you out there can help me determine why some of these are splitting off and some of them aren't. It's not a huge concern of mine. I would like to know if there's something I did. But the fact that it's in the same row,
that's what I was thinking. You was looking at different varieties. Yeah, that does kind of throw me off a little there.
Throws me off too. Maybe y'all can help us with that one. Number 8 is from Stacy Woodruff, and she says, heard about using gypsum to improve clay soil, but the guy at the extension office didn't seem to think much of it, though he didn't offer any reasons for his answers either. The only thing he would suggest was tilling in a bunch of organic material every year. Do you know any research that supports adding gypsum to clay soil, or are those recommendations basically anecdotal?
I dug up a little research here and I want to share it with you. Washington State University.
I found that article too.
From a lady called Linda Chalkler-Scott. She's a PhD at Washington State University. Wrote a good little research paper on using gypsum. Now, you can look it up on yourself. Just simply Google Washington State used earlier, the myth of gypsum magic, and you can read it for yourself. There's a couple things I highlighted here I think it's important to read to you. You really need to read the whole report. Some of it's a little tricky there. She kind of goes back and forth a little bit, but I'm gonna just read you the highlights of some of the things she put in there that I found interesting. One thing she says is gypsum improves sodic or saline soils by removing the sodium from the soil and replacing it with calcium.
So if you got too much salts in your soil, gypsum helps.
Right, if you got worn out soils that's been farmed forever, agriculture-wise or wherever like that, and they've had a lot of commercial fertilizer or what we call salt fertilizers on them, and they really heavily loaded up, gypsum's a good thing to flush them out, replace it with the calcium, which we need calcium to grow our vegetable stuff because we don't want blossom end rot. Okay, on the end of it, she's got the bottom line, and I'm gonna read a couple of these. It says the bottom line on all this report means this: gypsum can improve heavy clay soil structure and remove sodium from salty soils. Gypsum has no effect on soil fertility, structure, or the pH of any other soil type. So what that means is if you don't have those heavy, dense clay soils, gypsum's not going to do you good. Gypsum wasn't doing us any good with our type soils. We knew that. Gypsum only works on those particular type soils that are really compacted and really have really tight clay soils. Also, it says in there, adding gypsum to sand, I'm just repeating myself, adding gypsum to sandy or non-sodic, non-salt soils is a waste of money. I think she's probably right on that. So the takeaway of the whole of this thing is, it is beneficial in certain situations. It is not beneficial in all situations as far as adding gypsum to soils to improve structures of all soils, only a particular type of soil, which is the heavy clay. And it will also, that soil will have better drainage. It will open the pores of the soil up so it will drain better. So there you have it. Go read it for yourself and make your own conclusion. The guy at the Extension Office told you also to add copious amounts of organic matter and tillage. I think that's a great recommendation, but I also think gypsum can work to your advantage in certain situations.
Right, and I have heard a lot of the old timers over the years talk about they add lime to try to condition their soils. Problem with lime is it's going to adjust your pH, and if your pH is good, you don't want to add any lime to it. So if you don't want to change, gypsum's a great way to condition those hard soils without altering the pH like you mentioned.
Yep. Craig Lamb wants to know, can you talk about winter squash and pumpkin seeds you have available? Any tips for growing winter squash?
Woo-wee.
Woo-wee.
Do I got some winter squash and pumpkins available? I think, I went to the seed room, I think I got every variety of winter squash and edible pumpkin that we got. We got heaps of them. Before I go through some of my favorites here, a few tips on growing winter squash. Give them plenty of room. I like to plant mine in a square plot. I would say plant at least a row or two beside each other. The more plants you can get, the better pollination you're gonna get and the better overall harvest you can get. So if you can knock you off a little square, 20 by 20 or even bigger, but at least I'd say 20 by 20, you know, it is flooding out there. If you can knock, you know, square you off a little area, they'll do a lot better. That way you seem to get better pollination that way.
Winter squash do require pollination just like summer squash.
Right.
Watermelons, pumpkins.
The other thing, I said give them plenty of room, plant in a square plot, plant them early. Especially if you have some of them vine borer, squash bug, or even disease pressure, the mildews or whatever. Plant them early, get them in, harvest them in early summer. A few varieties we got here, bust through these. Two of the sweeter ones, they're sweeter, but they don't quite store as long, like 6 months as some of the others, are these delicata and the sweet dumpling. These are a smaller one, but these are excellent, excellent flavor on these. We've got this high kabocha, which is regarded by many as one of the best tasting winter squash there is. I grew this last year. It is really good too. We got a new butternut variety here called Polaris butternut, which has been really popular. Those have been flying off the shelves. You've seen me grow these before. I do a video on them, I feel like every year. These small wonder spaghetti squash.
That's your favorite there.
I mean, you can get 15 or so sometimes of these personal size spaghetti squash per plant. These things are really productive. We also got a new one called Primavera spaghetti squash, which is a larger one. If you want to grow the bigger spaghetti squash, you can grow these smaller ones vertically on a trellis. These are probably too heavy to do so. Blue Bayou pumpkin, awesome. You grew that last year.
If you're running a little late in the year and you are planting a little later than you really feel comfortable with on pumpkin, that's the one to go with. That has some wow factors as far as disease resistance.
Got a few left of these Cherokee tan pumpkins if you haven't jumped on that yet. And I think where my taters are, once my taters get done in May or so, I'm gonna fill up that plot with Cherokee tan pumpkins, because you ain't got to be as on the ball with these as you do the others, because they can take it.
When you plant them, you need to get out of the way.
A few more Cinderella's carriage pumpkin, which is a hybrid version of the original Cinderella pumpkin.
Yep.
That's a good one.
Let me talk about this for a second. So James George out of Texas called me yesterday, and he said he's planting a big patch of these right here, and he does a little market for them. This is a wonderful pumpkin here. If you want to sell a few pumpkins come fall, they do great at a little farm stand or farmer's market or whatever.
You can actually make more money if you quarter them up like they do in Germany.
Yep.
And sell it, because that's a lot of meat in that
huge,
side of
it's a pretty pumpkin, but with a name like Cinderella Carriage, it's got to sell.
Mm-hmm. Then we got the Fairy Tale, which is another good one. Kind of flattened pumpkin, a lot of meat inside it. This was a new one here, the Super Moon pumpkin, big old white pie pumpkin. And the last one here, which is I've seen before, this winter luxury pumpkin. It's a smaller one, but a really, really good eating pumpkin.
A good round pumpkin.
Lots of good options there as far as winter squash and pumpkins go. What else we got here?
Number 10.
B.R. Mabry 58, later in the question known as Brett from Arkansas, says, how far should I rotate my crops in a single plot garden? I'll have a row of squash and a row of okra and etc. Can I just rotate one row over? Or do I need to go multiple rows to get away from pests and disease? How do you rotate if you just got one plot?
You know, I've had this problem before because I don't have a huge garden, and I always try to plant stuff as intense as I can. And I've often thought about this right here. It is, you got different varieties out there or different species that has different problems that calls for a different answer. With okra, most of the time we're just facing nematode problems. Now you can move just a few feet to get away from that, but with tomatoes and peppers and things like that, we fight blight, which is soil-borne. A good rule of thumb is at least be 10 feet. Move at least 10 feet over. I wouldn't ruin one row, but at least 10 feet. If you can go a little bit further, that's fine, but at least 10 feet, and that'll pretty much cover yourself on everything with the exception of squash bugs. You really won't be further than that, but on most things, 10 foot.
Also has a little bit to do with where you live. If you live in an area that's cold enough to kill a lot of that stuff, the winter gets cold enough to kill some of them insect eggs.
Yeah.
You don't have as big of a rotation problem as you might down here.
Yep. All right.
Number
Bernice.
Beatrice.
Beatrice Pickens wants to know, I have a question in Texas, Zone 8B. I have been gardening for a couple years now and I can't grow a beet for the world. Can you tell me what I'm doing wrong? They grow the greens, but I don't ever get a beet.
Well, Beatrice, I can grow some beets. I can't grow everything. But
no, you can't.
One thing I can grow is some
I got
beets.
to work on you a couple things this year.
First thing, I recommend transplanting beets. It does take a little more work up front, but man, you can get them uniformly spaced. You don't have to worry about thinning them, and I just like transplanting my beets. If you grew all greens and no beet, most of the time that would suggest you had too much nitrogen and not enough of the P and K. The P and K is what's going to most of the time help your root development and help build those big roots for those root vegetables like beets. So I would say you need to get a more balanced fertilizer in there. You might have a little too much nitrogen. Those beet greens are great to eat, but when you're growing beets, you're growing it for the actual beet there. They also like a little boron. This stuff right here, this old micro boost works wonders for beets. It changed my beet planting game when we started using this stuff right here. You can inject it or you can just drizzle it down beside those plants. That micro boost will get those beets jumping and going. All right, number 12 is from Jeremy Edgeworth. He says, do you like to plant just before a rain? If so, how much upcoming rain will stop you from planting?
I normally don't worry about rain. I have my gardens up on a hill. I have sandy soils, drains well. I normally don't have any issues with that, and I don't worry about it. I plant when I can. However, if I'd have known what this was coming, I probably would have waited a little bit. We are probably going to be running in the neighborhood about 6 inches in a week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming down as we speak out there like crazy. So you don't know a lot of times what you don't know, but if I was knowing I was getting 6 or 7 inches, I'd let that get by me before I did anything else. But I don't have a problem most of the time. If you got those clay soils like we talked about earlier, you live in that bottom land, it's a different ball game. But us, you know, here in South Georgia, it's not normally a huge issue for us.
And it's hard to, we don't usually know how much rain we're going to get until it happens. We know it might rain all day, but you don't ever know how much it's going to. I would say if I'm putting out transplants, I'm not really trying to plant that around the rain because I usually got them on drip. But now with my carrots, I did try to get me some carrots planted the other week or before I went to San Diego before all this rain come because they like that real moist condition. So I'd say direct seeding, and sometimes I aim, you know, if I can plant my corn for a rainstorm, it's ain't a bad thing.
I don't care how much you try to plant it or how good you think you are. If you do it long enough, you're going to lose a few crops to the weather.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Mick 44114 says, I saw in one of your videos that you were putting fish emulsion from your injector on your plot with overhead water. What are your thoughts on just pre-feeding just your rows? Please do not give me any math problems. I'm from Tuscaloosa.
We understand that. And folks in Alabama ain't the greatest at math, but we still love them. So what we call, or what I call that, what a lot of other people call it, when you do that kind of fertilization before you plant, called a soil drench. And I did it in that video with the overhead just over that whole plot with the fish emulsion on that winter ride.
Well, you were brave, wasn't you?
What's that?
That fish emulsion overhead.
It really ain't that bad.
Really?
It really ain't that bad. I kind of
You don't want to run out there and jump in the
No, but I kind of like that has a little smell to it because I know my injectors, I know everything's working, you know. But yeah, you could just do a drenched alongside the road. Take your sprayer, your pump sprayer, take the spray nozzle off of it, put you some of that fish emulsion in there, and just drizzle it down there along the road where you're going to plant. Do your soil drench that way. That'll work. 14, this is from Kansas Truck Guy, and he says, I live in zone 5 and it has to do with watering. I have raised and traditional garden beds and water by hose at the base of the veggies. How often and how much should I water? Like twice a week or once? Seems like I may be watering too much if I do it every day during the summer.
I think you probably are. With ornamentals, we used to go by the recommendation an inch per week one time. So you'd want to put an inch down at one time, let it dry off. With vegetables, especially if you got new transplants out there, your seeded crops are going to be more, they're going to take care of themselves better. But if you got transplants out there for the first 2 or 3 days, you're going to have to keep them pretty wet. After they start getting established, you can probably back that off to 2 to 3 times a week and be fine. Now, when your corn starts coming in and your plant's really hot and it's dry, they start putting on fruit, you may have to bump that up just a little bit. But normally I water when it's hot and dry and it's not raining 3 to 4 times a week at most.
Yeah, I'd say it's real hot and dry every other day for me. Some crops, tomatoes don't really like infrequent watering. They like to be on a pretty good schedule. Other things doesn't.
Yeah, watering
really
every day can cause the host of other issues, so I wouldn't recommend that. But every other day, every 2 days, 3 days, according to the weather, temperature, and all that, you can adjust accordingly. All right, Debbie Bevins wants to know how you feel about organic gardening.
I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
We're this way, and we find through some surveys and stuff, we've talked to a lot of our customers, most people are this way. Most people try to be as organic as they can. And that's the same thing with us. We don't really use, if not all the pesticides we use are organic. We do use some copper, which is a non-organic fungicide, but for the most part, everything we use is organic. Now, we use some synthetic fertilizers. just because in some situations, especially fertilizing seedlings, organic fertilizers are too slow to really do anything in that short time window we have. So we do find most of our customers, we have some that are strictly organic, nothing wrong with that, and some that are more on the conventional side. We find ourselves kind of, if we lean to the organic, but not completely all the way over there.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand organic gardening. It can be confusing. Some of the experts will tell you, simplified, it's called farming with carbon-based products, or gardening with carbon-based products, which is pretty much what we try to do. We do use some salt-based fertilizers. You do not want to use all salt-based fertilizers. So we kind of do what works for us, but we try to do it as healthy as we can.
Number 16 from Shirley K says, how many days do you wait from the time you cut potatoes till you plant them?
Minimum 3 days, maximum, heck, I've let them sit there 2 weeks.
There's a lot of people out there that before my video, and I'm not saying I was inspiring a lot here, but that was planting whole taters. I didn't realize there's that many people out there that didn't cut the taters up. I was like, man, you can get your money's worth out of your tater seed there.
Man, back in the day, they tell me back in the Depression, they cut the eyes out and eat the potato. That's how tough it was.
We had one viewer that said they still do that. Cut them taters up. Don't be planting them whole.
And if you really want to get good about it, you get several eyes. You have to look real close, but there'll be a lot of them eyes there that ain't come out yet. You could take a 5-pound taters and go a long way.
Yeah, that's right. What we got now? 17.
Yeah, looks like it. Floyd Rossinia.
Rossinia.
Man, these names are killing me. When you hill your potatoes, do you end up covering the plant? And how much of the greens get covered? And is that okay?
Yeah, so we have a lot of people been asking about hilling potatoes, and if it can ever
we talked about that a little bit last week.
If it can ever dry up, I'll do a video on hilling taters.
Yeah.
My general rule is you're gonna cover about 2/3 of that plant up. You don't want to cover the whole thing unless you got frost coming. You cover the whole thing, but you don't want to cover the whole thing. Leave a few leaves exposed. I would say the goal there, cover about 2/3 of the plant.
Man, they'll love it. They'll come back and grow like crazy and reward you for it. And what you're doing is you're covering a lot of those weeds up too.
Yeah. Heal them taters and heal them. Last one is from Cheryl Purcelli, and she says, would it be possible to design an attachment to the wheel hoe that would allow you to side dress your plants with?
Well, I worked on that pretty hard for a couple of years, and I kind of backed off of it when I realized how hard it was going to be. And then everybody wants to side dress with a different type product, and that gets a little aggravating and nearly impossible to do. So being able to side dress with a synthetic fertilizer versus an organic fertilizer, the consistency and the weight of the product is different. It gets tough. So we pretty much backed off from that idea when we started using this injection system. Once we started injecting things in there, we really didn't see a need for a application to side dress with. And that's something we may come up with later. Still got some ideas on how to do it. And it's something we may have in the works, but it's not as pushing as the issue as it once was.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky if you think about it. If you're metering out for 10-10-10, then you switch up to Chilean nitrate, you got to change things up, or you're metering for that pelleted chicken stuff we got.
Or somebody won't put compost out there.
There's a good bit of figuring have to go into there.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we hope everybody enjoyed the Q&A section there. We appreciate everybody participating, and if you have any other questions, put them in the comments. As always, we'll be glad to get to them. We got to give away a few things.
All right.
So we're going to draw 2 names to get a hat, and if we draw your name, send us an email to custserve@hosstools.com, and with the color of the hat you want and your address. We got several colors. We got this new red and silver. We got this one here. I think I'm going to end up calling this sage. We've got the charcoal one that we've had for a little bit, the camo, and the all red one. So I'll let you do the honors here.
I got 2 though, just need to get 1.
Yeah, just get 1. I don't know why I'm not looking 2.
S. No, that's not S, that's 5.
5. Whose name's number 5? That would be Lorif Larson. So Lorif, send us your...
Lorif Larson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Send us your address and hat choice, and we'll get you one out. Do one more.
And the Erden is number 4. Boy, I got them right back to back.
Yeah.
Preston McCracklin.
Preston McCracken. Okay, so Laura from Preston both win a hat tonight, so send us your address and we'll get that out to you. Hope everybody dries out there. Hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. And if you enjoyed this show, go check out these 2 videos right here. I think you really enjoy them. We got one on those gynoecious cucumbers that everybody's getting ready to plant. Kind of explains the biology of those. And this other video is on Greg's Blue Bayou pumpkins that he grew last year and how well those performed for him.